Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to another deck tech. This time I'll be covering the Crazy Rage deck that Uska came up with. The No Burning Rage deck, which, I mean, apart from being a specifically tournament list with a couple different matchups, or more accentuated matchups, is actually a decent place to start if you don't want to shell out the ridiculous amount of shrines required to craft 4 Burning Rage. So that is definitely a good thing. So if you're looking for a place to start in Rage that does not require 4 epics, then here you go. So first things first, the hero, basic Zash. Yes, you don't even need the 5th epic here in advanced Zash. So Zash has the ability to stop an enemy creature from blocking every 2 turns. 1 mana isn't too costly. Now, Rage heroes normally have a slight issue of being a bit hard to use. Like, Burke has a few issues in how useful he is from time to time. Zash, unless you go full aggro, is pretty pointless, and Advanced Zash is only really useful if you go for the slower decks. So generally, the Advanced Zash decks have slowed down a bit to make use of the hero power and also Burning Rage, whereas the basic Zash decks are sped up. And this is basically the fastest of the Rage decks that you can possibly get. So, first things first, we have 8 1-drops. Yes, we got the Lizard and the Goblin. So, the Lizard's a bit more complicated. He is essentially a 2-2 for 1 mana if he's attacking face, specifically. He can't block, and he can attack other creatures, but only as a 1-2, which is still fairly useful sometimes. He deals with Plague Vermin, he deals with Grove Guardian. Like, he forces a combat trick is the point. Now, while he is good against some other 1-drops specifically, he's bad against a lot of 2-drops because most of them have 2 HP. So he can't trade up. He'll trade, well, he won't even trade with other 1-drops a lot of the time, but he can't really trade up, which is a bit of a problem sometimes depending on the matchup. However, he doesn't die to 1 damage ping, and still attacks for 2, so very, very welcome addition to the deck. Now, the other 1-drop is Goblin Warrior, your vanilla 2-1, 2 speed. He trades up with 2-drops. He trades with most 1-drops, apart from some random ones like Relic Guard and Valor Sworn Incarnate, things like that. The only problem with him is that he dies to stuff like weakness counters. However, there is a second upside, which is he can gain Swift off of Firebrand Goblin, which we'll talk about a little bit later for a bit of extra burst damage. So onto the 2-drop creatures. We got the main one, Goblin Fireworker. Again, vanilla creatures, basically. It's a 2-2 with 2 speed. You wouldn't think that's very good, but it's actually decent, and it's mostly here for its stats. Now, its secondary ability basically says destroy target lamp or demonic portal, or dark portal. And it definitely is quite handy to have 4 of these things against the portal decks. Against lamp, less so, because if they've got lamp set up, you're probably going to die anyway, because they've stabilized. But against Portal, he can definitely help out. He also just has a few clutch things against random things like Helm, although as we'll see, this deck has basically 0 Helm targets. So, yep, vanilla 2-2, doesn't die to ping effects, doesn't die to Fire Blast, just a sturdy guy to play on turn 2, or if you're going second, he's one of the only ways of actually winning the mirror match going second because he doesn't die to Fia or Word of Fire. And he also doesn't die to Lizard, which means if they start Lizard and you start Fireworker, you've probably won the game. So yes, he is actually surprisingly good considering his very vanilla stats. Definitely no Elf Warrior, but what can you do? The other 2-drop, only a 2 of, is Fia. Now, Fia has 2 main uses. The first is removal for small creatures, very, very good against goblins and Grove Guardian, and can trade with sharpshooters, which is a big deal. So good against small creatures and just random other 1-drops and implants and things like that. Her secondary use is storing damage up through blockers. So you can tie up a blocker with Fia and then sack her to get the damage off her ability. You can play Fia and then fireball them for 4, basically, because you get to sacrifice the Fia afterwards. So she just magnifies your damage a little bit. Not quite as good as the just vanilla stats that you get on the Fireworker. However, still decent. Also works very, very well with Massive Assault. 2 ranged is way better than 1, and 3 is even crazier. So you get more and more damage out of her over time. Now, Fia also has a couple shenanigans you can do, sacking in the middle of combat, and does have the issue of you sort of have to sacrifice her at a certain point, because otherwise if she gets removed you can't sacrifice her and you lose damage. The general rule is to sacrifice at 3 maximum, but sometimes that's not the case, but that's the general one. So, on to the 3-drops as we go up the curve. We just have the 1 3-drop, Gibbo and Ronnie. The 4/2 stats with 2 speed for 3 mana. Also, they're goblins, and they're over 2 bodies, which is actually a big deal, because often the goblins will, as I said earlier, trade with 2-drops. So your Gibbo and Ronnie will effectively trade with their 2-drop, and still have half of the card there. Also works very, very well in the swift attacks. You get a total of 6 damage out for 6 mana, or if you have a massive assault, that's 9 damage for 6 mana. So very, very good in the way that it can be used in early stats or in late game burst. Just a solid overall creature, and one of the best Rage has to offer. Multiple bodies is quite a useful thing. Firebrand Goblin. Now, Firebrand Goblin is the reason why the goblins are, well, better than they look, basically. It's not the only reason, but having Swift on goblins is huge. It allows you to play around Fire Blast by moving one of the Gibbo and Ronnie tokens back, or Arrow Barrage, actually, now that that's in the game. But yeah, it allows you to play around row-related things by putting stuff on back if you have a Firebrand Goblin, because then you can play the Firebrand, move your goblins forward and attack. Also allows you to get a lot of burst damage out late game. Works very, very well with Massive Assault, essentially becoming Haldir Rider that gives all of the rest of your stuff Swift as well. Not quite useful enough to play 4 of. It's a bit clunky. 3 mana, 2 levels, doesn't fit on curve very well, and 3 mana in general is a bit awkward later, so you don't really play more than 2 of these in the game maximum. So not quite a 4 of, but definitely still a useful surprise against a lot of control decks, especially in the late game. Now, the last of the creatures goes to the Flame Serpent. Yes, we're going full aggro. Now, you can debate this is a creature or a burn spell. It's basically both. This deck does use Flame Serpent better than most because of 2 things. Massive Assault buffs up its damage, and Basic Zash stops them from blocking, so you can use it as a removal spell that also deals damage to the face, which is actually quite handy. With a Massive Assault, you can maybe deal 2 damage to a creature. To kill it, say if they have a Brother-in-Arms, kill the Brother-in-Arms, deal 4 to face for 4 mana, which is really good. Now, the downsides of Flame Serpent are twofold. First of all, it's worse at dealing direct damage because it can be sort of blocked. Not entirely normally, since it'll be hitting for 6 or 7 in some cases. However, you can mitigate the damage off it, whereas you can't do that with other burn spells. The other downside to it is Flash Freeze. Well, and Tornado Outbreak, but it's mostly Flash Freeze. Getting your Flame Serpent Flash Freezed is not a good feeling. It just isn't. It's a 1 mana instant taking out a 4-drop. That is never fun. Tornado is also kind of brutal, but less so because you can usually replay it next turn, so unless you're dead, it's usually fine. But yeah, Flame Serpent, definitely powerful, and is one of the big 5 damage burn spells that you want to use to close out the game, so it is a 4 of. Now, onto the spells. The spells are what make Rage decks good. The creature base is not fantastic. It's okay, but compared to, say, Elves, which we went over before, which has, 4 damage from a 3-drop, and it's got 3-speed creatures and Grove Guardians that hit for massive amounts of damage, compared to that creature base, it looks kind of terrible. So where do you get the power from? That would be the spells. First of all, you have very, very powerful removal spells in the case of Word of Fire in particular, and also Fire Blast. So Word of Fire usually hits for 2 and then 3 later on. Not having Burning Rage is both a boon and also a downside. The reason for that is because you have a lot of burn that you want to hold in your hand for later. So having Burning Rage with Word of Fire is kind of awkward because you draw too much and then you can't drop your hand size. However, Burning Rage also powers up Word of Fire and allows you to keep your hand size up and then drop it with creatures. So there's a bit of a plus and a minus there, but in general, Word of Fire will be dealing with a lot of really annoying creatures like Harpy and Mesmerizing Spirit without losing effective card advantage. It also just hits for 3 against a lot of things without taking 3 mana, which is nice, and cycling allows you to get some better stuff later. Now, I have not put Lightning Bolt in this deck. Haven't tested it. I'm not entirely sure whether or not it is good. I will have to sort of wait to see what some of the other Rage players do, since I'm not playing a lot of Rage currently, although I imagine I'll probably go back to it like I always tend to. So no Lightning Bolt on this list, but maybe that'll show up in the future. Now, the second dedicated removal spell is Fire Blast. Only a 2 of. You may notice only 3 of Word of Fire as well. Only 2 Fire Blast. Now, Fire Blast is mostly for the Mirror and other aggro decks. It deals with some decent stuff. It also does 3 damage, but you've got Fireballs as well and Word of Fire, so Fire Blast is less essential for just the single target removal. But it deals with just backline stuff for Mesmerizing Spirit, Soldiers, any Rage decks, and also Elf decks get kind of smothered by Fire Blast. So it is very, very handy. However, keeping in mind this deck was designed for a tournament specifically, and in that tournament it was ban green, beat Wisdom Dominion, and 2 Fire Blast is pretty much all you need against control decks, and I stand by that. It also makes the deck a bit more budget actually, considering an extra 3 rares have been cut. But yeah, only the 2 Fire Blast, which might be a little low, and this deck could maybe do with a little bit of retooling moving forward. So, on to the damage-based spells. This is how you close out the game. Your creature base will, on average, deal about 10 damage, maybe 8 damage, and then you've got to deal 10 to 12 through burn spells, and I'm including Flame Serpent in that list of burn spells there. So, first of all, let's go with the least sort of direct approach, Massive Assault. Now, Massive Assault, I have described as a win more card before. Yeah, it still kind of is. But the difference with this deck is that it's so all-in face that Massive Assault actually becomes kind of insane. It does 2 or 3 damage each per game and allows you to get a lot of trades you pretty much shouldn't be getting, because it doesn't say attack enemy hero, it just says attack. Which means stuff like Lizard goes up to 3 attack if attacking the enemy hero, but goes up to 2 against creatures. And Goblins become very, very hard to block with Library Guards because they all have 3 attack. So Massive Assault does allow you to push damage along with the hero power that you probably wouldn't be able to normally, and makes your Flame Serpents more powerful as well. A solid spell for this kind of deck. I don't really like it outside of these kinds of decks, but if you're playing Flame Serpent, I think Massive Assault is definitely a good addition. It also works really, really well with Firebrand Goblin combos. Then we've got Fireball, the removal burn spell. 3 mana, 3 damage, instant. One of the simplest burn spells in the entire game. And it doesn't do anything flashy, but it definitely does its job very well. Now this will most of the time be going towards creatures, although it does often go to the face, but usually in clutch situations. Most of the time it's Dragonfire Flame Serpent doing the killing blow, if you will. However, Fireball does have a bit of play to it, where you can hold it up. If you have a Sensual Lethal in your hand with multiple burn spells and a Fireball, you can hold Fireball up, and if you're worried about them killing you, just don't play it. And if they play something crazy with like Swift, you just kill it with Fireball. And if they don't, you Fireball them, and then your turn again, Dragonfire, and you win. So it does have a bit of play to it, where you get to bluff a little bit, and your opponent doesn't really know how much damage you have. If you just pass the turn when you've got, say, 5 mana and 3 levels, because you could just have a Fireball into a Dragonfire, whereas if you just Dragonfired face, maybe you would do something a bit more risky, or maybe you would say, oh, coast is clear to just go all in. So it does have a bit of play there, and is a very, very useful removal spell to use end of turn. So if you don't curve out with, say, 1-drop, 2-drop Gibber and Ronnie, if you don't have the Gibber and Ronnie, you can just Fireball his Library Guards or something and get a lot of damage in anyway. Now, the last spell in the deck is the Dragonfire, the most direct card in the entire game. It has one job, player removal. I mean, it can be used to kill stuff like Guardians and, not really Antriel, but mostly Guardian and Succubi occasionally. You're really stretching if you have to kill a 3 HP creature with this, but it will mostly be killing stuff with 4 HP occasionally. I mean, if you have to kill a Karthus, that's kind of rough, because then that Karthus has essentially gained 7 life. But most of the time, it's not a removal spell. Most of the time, it goes straight to the face and deals a quarter of their life total in one shot. And you can't stop it without something like Silencer, and this is something that will get mind extorted a lot if they actually have it. So do not underestimate this thing. It looks very, very simple, but you'd be surprised how effective a 5 damage burn spell is. As for the shrines, very basic. 18 basic ones. Why? Because, well, you don't need Altar if you're not running Burning Rage, because you can't really afford the card disadvantage. You don't need to drop your hand size at will. And also, playing 18 basics means that you have more consistency with Divine Offerings, because you need to Divine Offering less, because you're drawing off all the shrines, and that makes up for the problem with running 18 versus 19. So anyway, let's see if we can hop into a ranked game. As far as matchups goes, the stuff that this has trouble against is mostly the green decks. It has a few issues against Hate Bears and Elves, although they're about 60-40, I would say. They're not landslide victories. Pun intended. But yeah, they're not landslide victories. Against control decks, it pretty much flattens them. It's almost designed to prey on control decks, because if they stumble once, they're dead. The deck does so much damage so fast and is quite consistent, so if you don't have a decent or even very good opening with something like Wisdom Dominion, you're just dead. You need like a ramp spell into Mutant, pretty much, to survive, and even then you need something else to follow. The other problem with beating this deck with Dominion-based control decks is Cataclysm doesn't do anything, because Cataclysm, well, what are you using it on? A goblin? You've got other ways of killing goblins, so most stuff is coming from hand, it's just swift damage, and whenever I played against this with a Cataclysm-based deck, I would just have them in hand and never cast them. So, yes, definitely very, very good against control decks. Now, I'm going first here. I've got 2-drop, 3-drop, Fireball. Is that good enough? I do really want a 1-drop, but I think I'll keep this. It's very safe. Yeah, it's very, very safe. He's playing Advanced Era, so I have no idea what this is. But, I mean, it could be One Turn Heal, but I honestly have no idea. Advanced Eris is always a very strange hero. Alright, so this is just Fireworker, Gibber and Ronnie, Massive Assault, or Fireball, depending on what he does. Assassinate instead of Ramp Spell. That could actually be a problem. Yeah, this could actually be a problem. The reason for it is because if he has Spark Mutant, he shuts down my entire early game. Interesting. Okay. So he's at 4... Okay, so he's at 4 mana. Let's set up the Massive Assault, and we'll get down a Lizard Barbarian. The reason we're playing the Lizard is because the Goblin Warrior can potentially come down as swift damage later, whereas the Lizard really can't. So I need to get the Lizard down when he has no creatures. Now, he's not playing Advanced Despina or anything, so he can't do any shenanigans here when it comes to ramping out a Cataclysm. Wow, this is a super defensive deck. Jesus. Now, he probably has Cataclysm. If he has Karthus, that could be really, really bad. I think I'll just hold on to the Fireball, and if he has Karthus, he has it. He could still have Karthus, since he has the ability there. Alright, I'll just Fireball him, get extra damage in where I can. Another Massive Assault. This is where things get very, very strange for me. I think what I want to do here is play the Gibber and Ronnie. I mean, I'm basically giving up the Fireball play, but I need to get a little bit of extra damage in, so I'll Divine the second Massive Assault, because I don't think I need it. I'll play the Gibber and Ronnie. If he has something like Karthus, that could be quite rough. I may actually have to Dragonfire it. I mean, if he just played Karthus, he would take out probably one of the Gibbo. Well, he'd take out the Gibber and Ronnie. So I could maybe just Dragonfire it and get in some extra damage, and maybe that would be enough. $13 life. 3, 6, 11. Not quite enough. Alright, so we got the double fireball, so I can fireball him end of turn twice, and then that should be enough. Unless he has something like Mind Extortion. Yeah, if he has a Mind Extort, I could be in potential trouble here. Maybe. It depends a lot on what his second play is. Like, if he goes Mind Extortion Karthus, that'll put him at 9. And there's one half of it. No, he's still dead if he did that. Yeah, second fireball turned out to be incredibly useful. Not that there's a lack of burn spells in this deck. It's pretty much half the deck is burn. Alright, so Wisdom Dominion control player there. We'll see if we can get an extra game in. Since the first game was very, very quick. I mean, aggro decks generally play very, very fast because if you lose, you probably lose in about 10 turns since you just can't win from there. Maybe not 10 turns, maybe 11 or 12. But the point is you generally lose if the game goes beyond a certain threshold. Whereas most of your victories will be 6 or 7 turns, so they go very, very quickly. Whereas something like when I did Wisdom Dominion Control, that would be like 15 to 20 turns in a lot of cases. I mean, you're not really going to win a game before turn 10, are you? Like, you need to have multiple ramp spells and things like that to even get anywhere. But anyway, in terms of other matchups, talked a bit about the green decks. There's also some other weird ones, like Angels. You'd think Angels would be really bad. It's not that bad. It can be potentially a problem. It depends on how good your opening is. So, for instance, if you have a Fia or a Word of Fire, you're generally fine against stuff like Valor Incarnate. And if they don't have Valor, then they don't really have any other good openings. And if you have a Fireball for the Angel Blessed Knight, you probably won the game. However, if they get an Angel Blessed Knight down and it sticks, they get a Guardian down before you can Dragonfire it, and you're not getting through that at that point, and then the Gantry only win the game. So it is very volatile, but I think it's slightly favored towards the Rage deck, but I'm not really the expert on that. Double 1-drop, Word of Fire, yeah, I'll keep this. I'm not really the expert on that, so I could not really tell you. But yeah, it's not a landslide either way, that is for sure. Now, we'll go for the double 1-drop here. This has worked out quite well, unless he has Fumes. If he has Noxious Fumes, I think I've lost. Okay, he does not. Because if he fumes the goblin and then reduced and killed the lizard, that's just ridiculous. That would be best opening like you could do. Now that was a very, very good draw because I don't have anything to Word of Fire. Now if he has Mesmerizing Spirit, I think I just discard the Fireball and Word of Fire it. This matchup is interesting. I think would be the best way of putting that. Now, he's got a creature in his yard, so I do want to kill this. This matchup is interesting because stuff like Insatiable Ghoul is a pain in the neck to kill, but I mean, it really does depend on things like Mist Divine Offerings and also how many Word of Fires I get. So there's a couple options here. I can either Fireball it and kill it with the Lizard. I can either trade 2 for 1 and lose the Lizard, or I can trade the Fireworker for it. I could also trade the Lizard for it, but I would not do anything else with my turn, and I would miss some damage on him. Actually, maybe that's okay. Yeah, I think that's fine, actually. I'm missing 2 damage on him, but I'm gaining something for trading. I have a lot of damage in hand, so maybe I don't actually need the extra 2. It also draws me an extra card, which means I'm less vulnerable to stuff like, well, not Restless Tombs, but stuff like Mesmerizing. So we'll just get the 4 damage in. I'm basically racing him now. He's at 14. He's dead in 3 turns. That's what I need to build towards. He's dead in 3 turns. If he starts trading, he's gonna die. Like, I'm doing well on clock right now. He needs healing, basically. Okay, so he's trading, not dealing damage. That's good for me. Because now I've got Flame Serpent. I have to deal 14 damage between 2 Flame Serpents and a Dragonfire, I think. If... Discard the Fireball. Okay, so he's going to trade. That puts him at 9. We'll get rid of the Massive Assault. Next turn I've got Flame Serpent with Hero Power, and that should keep me out of range of something like Mesmerizing Spirits. Yeah, this deck does boil down to just dealing 15 damage with burn spells sometimes. It's kind of funny. Okay, we hit the Divine. He needs Succubus. Succubus would actually be a problem for me here. He does not have it. He didn't draw any healing. This game was... I mean, zombies in general, I will say this for the record, zombies against rage decks are extremely coin flippy. It's entirely based on who gets the better opening and also who draws like more of their win condition, which is burn versus healing. So if he drew a Succubus there, I think I was kind of screwed because he had the Restless Dooms pumping out damage. But, I mean, he didn't have it, so he just lost. There was never really a board set up for something like Consume, so it wasn't too bad. The opening zombie going first was kind of rough, but he didn't have the fumes, so I think I just drew slightly better than him there. I didn't draw fantastically, like I was very reliant on burn spells and not on creatures, because I didn't really get many. But overall, I did draw slightly better than him. That 2-drop on turn 2, the top deck of the Goblin Fireworker, was pretty big, and I think that's probably what won me the game. I know it's going to tilt some people, so I'll, I'll accept the quest report there. But anyway, that's about it for the Rage deck tech. So, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback or want to ask me any questions about the deck, put it in the comment section below. If you want to support the channel directly, there is a link to my Patreon in the description, along with a code for any new players that gives you 75,000 gold, and also the Disquisitive Spirit Card Back, which is down here. But now, it's been Jotto, signing off.